How do we prevent disease, which we're seeing coming on earlier and earlier? We're seeing 30-somethings with heart disease, and cancer is rising with younger people as well, people under 40. And this is lifestyle driven. This did not exist before. Everything about our metabolic disease rates, the obesity rates, this is very novel. This did not exist in 1900.
A little bit about Zane Griggs. He has been a health expert for 25 years. He is the author of the book Kicking Ass After 50 and host of the internationally ranked podcast Healthy AF, Healthy After 50. He has a large Instagram following. His focus is delivering custom programs on diet, exercise, and sleep to help his clients perform at their highest level in all areas of life. I'm excited to dive in.
Your blood sugar goes up all the time because your body's responding to stress. When you go work out, your blood sugar goes up. One of the most potent longevity lifestyle habits you can have is...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. I bumped into our next guest at the recent Biohackers World event in Austin. My Vital C had a booth at the event, and as usual, I took the opportunity to mingle with as many health enthusiasts as I could, including our next guest, Zane Griggs, who was a keynote speaker and was also on one of the panel discussions. Zane's tagline is Healthy AF. Now, if you're like me and many others, AF stands for, well, obviously after 50. I went back and rewatched his talk at the Biohackers World event because I was manning the booth, and I really enjoyed that talk, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. A little bit about Zane. He has been a health expert for 25 years. He is the author of the book Kicking Ass After 50 and host of the internationally ranked podcast Healthy AF, Healthy After 50, which was a shift from his previous podcast, Hunger, Hunt, Feast, which we may get into that shift because I think that's an important part of what's going on with Zane these days. He has a large Instagram following. His focus is delivering custom programs on diet, exercise, and sleep to help his clients perform at their highest level in all areas of life. I'm excited to dive in. All right, so you have been a health expert for 25 years. You help people with all aspects of health. Your own personal journey includes at one point the realization that you were, and this is a quote from an interview I saw, clearly overtraining. Can you talk about your health journey, walk us through the mindset that led you up to the point of overtraining and how you ended up now writing books, having a podcast, delivering value to customers and followers around the world?
Oh, well, it was really kind of an escalation over when early on, as I got into fitness, most of the demand for my clients is weight loss, of course. And that's just kind of where you start with this solving problems for people. And I found early on, like as early as 2002, low carb diet was like my go-to for helping people get a handle on their weight, and through diet and, movement, of course, exercise, of course, but they had to have that extra component of diet for it to really be effective. And so I would experiment with these things as well. I wouldn't want my clients to do something I hadn't done before. Got a lot of pushback from peers. So I want to make sure, hey, can I manage this? Can I do this myself? So I was always self-experimenting. And through that, from low carb in 2010, started playing with intermittent fasting, experimenting with that. And I don't think any one of these things are necessarily a bad tool when used appropriately, but I was really cranking them pretty hard. I was really pulling these metabolic stressors, like doing 24-hour fasts once a week, like 15, 16, 8, sometimes 18-hour fasts with on the other days of the week with fasted workouts afterwards. And I was doing really high intensity strength training workouts, like back-to-back supersets, that kind of thing, really fast-paced, mostly fasted. Maybe some sprinting here and there, a little cardio, but it was just, I was pulling all these stressors, experimenting with these tools, and I was super lean, looked good, but I realized I just wasn't feeling good. And there were markers on my blood work where at first I didn't realize the impact with like my sex hormone binding globulin was always out of range. It was very high, it's in the red. which is a telltale that your cortisol levels are very high, your epinephrine's very high. So you got a stress hormones just cranking at that point. And my TSH was elevated. My thyroid numbers, my T3, T4 were fine, but TSH was pretty elevated, which means my body's working pretty hard to pump out those thyroid hormones. So there was stress there. And again, when I first saw it, I didn't make the connection. But then as I was in my late 40s and I started feeling really run down. Like sleep was bad, muscles were burning all the time, not really making many strength gains, and my weight was kind of stuck, or it would lean out really fast. It would just kind of get a little overtaxed pretty easily. And it kind of hit me. I was like, I'm too many metabolic stressors. And so I started slowly adjusting. It wasn't like a big swing. I knew exactly what it was, but I just kind of backed off on the workouts, maybe including a few more carbs, a little less fasting. And over time realized, yeah, this is the problem. My TSH came back into range where it needed to be. Sex hormone binding globulin came back into range eventually. And I really started digging a little deeper here, like, what is the ideal fueling? I knew it wasn't just the workout. I was overtraining because I was working out too much alone. It was the fueling aspect that was really impacting the stress going into the workout and my ability to recover. So adding more carbs in over time, and a little less fasting, I found, oh my gosh, my sleep's better. I have more energy. I feel better. I'm actually putting on some muscle. I'm getting stronger. I'm not feeling some of these nagging injuries. I'd get to a certain level of, when I was kind of really in that underfueling phase, I get to a certain level of weight or intensity, and then I have some sort of nagging, I won't say a pulled injury, but like it was inflammation. It was like pain in like around a hip or shoulder. And it was just like I was hitting a wall every time. And in hindsight, realizing I just wasn't recovering. I was building up all this inflammation. And so there'd be some areas that might have been under a little extra stress that just weren't recovering. And they would turn it, because they wouldn't recover and I'd keep hitting them, they turned into like just like a tendonitis type of issue. All driven by really underfueling. And that's when I really started tracking. I started tracking my food a little more closely and understanding, what is it measured? Is it managed? Right? And so rather than kind of shooting from the hip, thinking, oh, I know what I'm eating. It was, let's start from scratch here, weighing food, tracking it in the app, seeing, what carb level seems to be ideal and allow me to sleep better and recover, and what is too low, or am I getting all the protein I need, and what does that look like? What do my ratios need to be? And start getting really nitty gritty with things that I've been, like I said, for a long time, just shooting from the hip, because I was just, I'll just stay low. I'll just stay low on the carb and try to eat some protein and go with eat from a satiety standpoint rather than, well, what does my body really need? And from an understanding of physiology, like training more like an athlete instead of training like a dieter. And that was really the difference. I was experimenting with all these stressors that were applicable to a dieter in the right context, right? In appropriate amounts, with appropriate tool for the right, problem and the right goals, but they weren't appropriate for me because I was already lean. I was training pretty hard, low fasting insulin, and I was just overtaxing my body, and there was no need for it. And to the point that it was detrimental. And the energy I get from it was that cortisol. That stress hormone can be deceiving. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, my mind wakes up when I'm fasting, or my mind, I feel so much more energy. Well, that's stress hormone. And so for a time, we can handle that kind of stress. And for a time, it may be beneficial from a weight loss standpoint if you're trying to correct some eating habits, some bad eating habits, or create some stress around a sluggish system, then they can be used appropriately. I'm still not a fan of long-term keto or long-term very low carb. I think there's, everyone's going to have a thyroid, or most people have some sort of thyroid issue, some sort of stress issue over time with that. And then you should probably come in and out of it, even in a weight loss, with weight loss goals. But for me, there was just no need. and they're, come across these. There's a condition called REDS that many athletes who are trying to make weight, they're trying to improve their power to weight ratio by lowering their weight and by maintaining strength and power for their sport. And it's a relative energy deficiency in sport. So, and you have a lot of the same symptoms that I was experiencing. Basically, signs of low thyroid, low energy, and it starts impacting your ability to brain fog, focus, and your sleep, disrupting the quality of your sleep. And I was tracking with an Oura ring. I could see, okay, I'm not getting deep sleep. I'm not getting much REM sleep, waking up a lot. And so it was really changing my whole philosophy around what I thought were these hormetic stressors, which were good for everybody in every way, and we should be doing them all the time. It was, okay, I was overdoing these hormetic stressors to the point that it was detrimental. My workout was enough of a stressor in many cases, and just eating clean. I mean, I ate a great diet. I didn't have processed food in my diet. I had been eating whole food for a long time. I mean, really eliminated that for many years ago. And I found that as I increased my carb intake beyond what I would have before told anybody was necessary, the better I felt, the better my numbers looked. Even my cholesterol numbers came down. My LDL and my total cholesterol numbers came back into close to normal range. And I wasn't worried about that, but it told me, okay, without decreasing saturated fat, without decreasing meat intake, if anything, I was more consistently eating a substantial amount of meat and fat because I was measuring. But the carb intake and lowering my stress hormones actually improved. Well, improved is a relative term, but I lowered my lipids, my LDL and my total. And which I have to say is just probably tied in some way to a stress response, or the use of as much of a need for that fat as fuel. It could be a combination of both. But it was eye-opening, and there didn't seem to be a downside. It was definitely something to manage. I still manage it, still control it, but it's very difficult when you're eating whole food. When like my carb intake was coming from potatoes, sweet potatoes, fruit primarily, maybe some starchy veggies if you want to call them that, but I mean very, very few vegetables. It's primarily potatoes, fruit, and maybe some, like I said, sweet potatoes. But it was whole food, very difficult to get a really high, go out of range of what my caloric needs were. So I was tracking my daily baseline, like what I needed between activity and BMR combined at 2,900 calories. And it was I had to be deliberate about eating to hit that. So eating whole food, the satiety levels hit. I wasn't eating processed food. So I was getting nutrient dense food that isn't necessarily that calorie dense compared to a processed food. So it wasn't like, I mean, you good luck overeating potatoes or apples. I mean, you just can't do it. Yeah, or meat. You just can't do it. You can't do it. Your body's like, no, we're done. We got enough. So sometimes I have to be very deliberate about hitting just my basic, my daily, I would say recommendation, but my daily needs, right? My daily caloric needs, just to maintain a baseline. And that told me a lot. That told me just how underfueled I was. And then when my hormone levels came down, the SHBG and the TSH came down into normal ranges, that really, I think, was the confirmation of what had been going on. And then it was a simple fix of just fueling. And I just kicked myself for being so blind to it, for so long. And I think there was a combination of that, of age with it. Like when I was younger, I could withstand that level of stress. My body could handle it. My body could, recover, sleep, or could just handle the stress because hormone levels were higher. But in the mid late 40s, it was like, we're not putting up with this anymore. We can't keep doing this. We can't keep pushing it like this. And when I hit that wall, it was like, okay, reality hit. And so that was when I had to kind of reset and change my whole philosophy, change my message, change, swallow some crow, and so to speak, and really check my ego.
Yeah, I think there is this transition that happens from, we'll just call it youth, right, to we'll call it middle age. We don't even need to ever talk about older age. We'll just call it all. There's youth and there's middle. That's all. That's all there is in
Right.
my mind. And so yeah, you come to these awakenings. I still remember eating two big classics from when they're huge sandwiches and two large fries, and then and maybe stealing food off of my parents. Like there was just a time when that was happening. And you think about stress, like in growth phases, you're just all stress, right? Like this, like you're growing, everything's achy. So you kind of you had. It sounds like you're kind of, correct me here. Were you collecting and keeping track of data, right? So getting blood tests, understanding where your levels were, or did you really kind of feel like you hit a wall and said, "Hey, let me check some things"? Which one of those were you doing?
No, I've been checking for a couple years.
Yeah,
I started getting blood work in my probably mid 40s.
yeah,
On a regular basis, where I was really looking
okay,
at it. And at first, it just didn't, like, the doc, of course, couldn't explain. He didn't know, why my
yeah,
SHBG was high or the TSH was high. They're just like, oh, well, I don't know about that. A lot of guys have that. I'm sure they do. Stressed out middle-aged guys, right? And then who can't sleep. And then TSH, oh, well, you just take some thyroid. That'll alleviate some of the, and it's like, there's something here, but I didn't connect the dots
yeah,
until I really started hitting that wall and reassessing everything and backing off on certain things and adding some fuel. And then all of a sudden, oh, the TSH corrected itself. And then SHBG started coming down. And that high cortisol and high epinephrine, that's gluconeogenesis in high gear, right? That is my body saying, you need glucose. So we're going to break down amino acids from your muscles, skin, and bones so that you can convert, so your liver can convert that to glucose to fuel your needs, not just by workouts, but who knows, if I were maybe less active, I might have been able to maintain it longer, but I didn't want to live less active. I want to keep muscle. And
yeah,
so, and as you get older, the last thing you want to do is start breaking down lean mass in order to create sugar when you could certainly eat it if your body needs it, because if it's creating it, it needs it.
yeah.
And so where I can choose between a potato or breaking down my muscle to get it, I'm going to go for the potato.
Gee, when you put it that way,
I mean, it's just not that. To me, it's an easy choice. And then the SHBG came back into range, and that means, and so anytime your SHBG is high, so if people understand what that is, the sex hormone binding globulin is just what it says. It binds to your sex hormones. So it's going to lower your testosterone levels, especially your free testosterone. And so if your free testosterone is it's already coming down as we get into our 40s and close to 50. And it's already decreasing just because of age. And there's only so much you can do to keep it up. Poor diet, on the other end of the spectrum, if you're overweight, high blood pressure, insulin resistant, and a lot of visceral fat, yes, you're going to have lower T because you're not in optimal health. But there's another end of the spectrum where if you're overstressed and the sex hormone binding globulin is high because your cortisol is elevated, and which not only binds to your free testosterone but disturbs your sleep, which is going to affect your testosterone levels as well negatively. I mean, it's like there's a sweet spot in the middle. So it's not a little is good, more is better. No, there's a sweet spot where we have a certain amount of stress we can handle. If we don't have enough of it, we get sick. And if we have too much of it, we get sick. And so and it's not to be prescriptive with like my way is the best, but look at these things, assess. A lot of people trying these stressors, whether it's cold plunge or fasting or some sort of low carb or keto diet. These are all stressors, and we need to treat them that way and understand that our body can only handle so much of it when you couple it with managing your family, career, if you have to travel for work. All of these things are stressors, whether they create what you think of as a good byproduct or a bad one. It's all stuff that your body has to handle. And there's very few things like carbs and insulin levels going up will bring those cortisol levels down, will bring the stressors down and allow your body to refuel and heal. And this fear of insulin and fear of spiked blood sugar is silly. That's how our body responds to food and restores and maintains lean mass, muscle mass, and shoves nutrients into our tissues. So a fear of insulin, when insulin's out of control, yeah, but we can manage insulin levels. We can manage our blood sugar. It should work. It should serve us. It should work for us. We don't live in fear of it because it's a hormone that our body uses for a purpose. Cortisol, we use cortisol for a purpose. And fight or flight is necessary during our workouts to deal with a stressful situation. But if it's chronically elevated, then it's a problem. Same with that insulin. It has a purpose. We use it for certain situations. When it's chronically elevated, it's a problem. But we don't fear it altogether.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where this swung the wrong way.
Have you done a continuous glucose monitor?
Oh, yeah.
Have you tried one of those? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Your blood sugar goes up all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, traffic, a
Wow.
tense conversation with your spouse or a coworker, or you got to get up and give a speech, or you got to, get on the phone and be, hey, I need a refund on this. Anything like that will elevate your blood sugar because your body's responding to stress. When you go work out, your blood sugar goes up. Your liver is dumping glucose into your bloodstream to fuel you. And if you don't have enough glycogen in there to get you through that because you've been low carbing, whatever it is, you're underfed or you're fasted, it'll start breaking down lean mass to fuel your workout, which is kind of silly. It's like a little ring around the rosy there. Let's break down muscle so we can build muscle. Let's break down muscle so we can build muscle. And so that kind of like where, I can't handle this level of stress anymore. And it really wasn't that good for me to begin with. My body was coping with it, but it's still not a good plan, especially when I don't have weight to lose. My fasting insulin was like 3. So it's like, what more can I want for my insulin levels? Again, misusing a tool. It was taking a good thing and saying, if little is good, more is better. And it not respecting the body's need for recovery.
It's almost like we need to change the phrase. If a little is good, data is better.
Data is better. Exactly.
Let's shift it to that because the more is better is not always true. It's interesting. A lot of people have talked about, better focus on intermittent fasting or any sort of fasting, and I never thought of it associated it with cortisol, but that makes perfect sense, right? It's a stressor. We might starve to death, so we actually do need clarity of mind so that we can go find food, right? Like though that made sense to me, but to couple that with cortisol and know that that's a stressor, interesting. So I'm probably, as every interview I ever do, I have more homework to do at the end of it. Yeah, you talked about some nagging conditions. I certainly feel like that from time to time. What's your typical test frequency? Like how are you? How often are you pulling your SHBG? How often are you looking at this data?
Usually, give or take about every 6 months.
6 months. Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting you said, so you started incorporating carbs, which, I certainly, I am probably still in the phase where I have fear of carbs. Like I'm just going to be honest.
Sure.
And it's just drilled into you, right? I don't have any fear of resistant starches, which is a carb, right? It's just a slower burning carb. You said you just noticed no downsides. Just for frame of reference, as you were adding carbs, what was your biggest concern? Like you were going to start packing on pounds. Like what was your concern as you were kind of ramping up your carbs?
Maybe an elevated insulin level, or that because when you're when you're low carb for a long time, any kind of low carb diet, you develop, because your brain needs a certain amount. Your brain needs probably at least 100 120 grams of carbs a day just to function along with everything else. So ketones cannot replace the need for glucose. Your body uses glucose every day. You're working out. But when you're on a low-carb diet, you will develop some level of physiological insulin resistance. So it's not pathological. It's not like when you're insulin resistant because you've got a disease state like heading towards type 2 diabetes. you're pre-diabetic. It's physiological and to conserve glucose for the brain. So your body will actually your create some sort of insulin resistance at the muscle to preserve glucose for brain function. This is pretty well established, and you can come out of that. It's easy. It's not, like I said, it's not pathological. It's just an adaptive response to a survival response, really, to low fueling, to preserve, because the brain is the most important tissue, and it's so sugar hungry, so glucose hungry. So that is easy to fix with titrating up on the carbs. But I wouldn't want to go from, say, someone's used to eating like a keto, like 50 grams of carbs or maybe less than 100 grams of carbs, and suddenly just move them automatically up to 300 a day the next day or the next week. Like, oh, let's just jump you up. That might be more than the body would need time to adjust. Right? Now, not that there'd be anything harmful coming from it, but you might get some wonky numbers for a bit. Like your blood sugar might be higher than usual for a bit, or your insulin might go up and down. So titrating up, I was like, okay, well, how much do I need? So I'd go up a little more, like, okay, let's go to the 200, 250 range. Let's see what 300 does. So going up slowly lets your body adjust. And I just wasn't sure. I wasn't sure I kind of gauge a lot by fasting insulin levels, and I wanted to make sure. I didn't think I'd put on a lot of fat. I wasn't worried about getting heavy or chunky or anything like that. But I was more concerned with like the hormone levels and what my blood work would look like. Because as a precursor, because that's going to change long before you start putting on fat weight or really developing insulin resistance, is your hormone numbers are going to go up to control what's going on in your body. Like insulin's a precursor. If you're not getting fasting insulin on your blood work, you're missing a big warning sign of something coming in the future. That will be elevated 5 or maybe 10 years before you develop diabetes. And so it gives you a big indicator that, hey, something's wrong, or you need to fix something or adjust something. Why it's not on normal blood work, I have no idea. Well, but because a lot of doctors some of them won't even let you put it on there. They just don't, and they don't ask for it voluntarily. It's amazing. I've had clients say, yeah, my doc didn't want me add that to my blood work. You might need a new doctor, because that's a big warning sign. And if they don't understand that, that gives you early eyes on what's going on hormonally. So that being said, it wasn't a vanity concern or a weight concern as much as it was, how will this affect my triglycerides? How will this affect my fasting insulin level? Is my blood sugar going to be, having weird spikes? I'm going to be like having big blood sugar swings, and having, so I just wanted to titrate up and say, well, what is the right amount? I don't need to go from 0 to 100 overnight. I just let's go up and see what works. And can I adjust my workouts around this? How much can I really push it? So always trying to push the limit, but wisely this time. Right. And so that was the concern. It's like, what's this going to look like on blood work, and not just jump to conclusions. I didn't know where the target was at this point. So I didn't know what my sweet spot was. And I wanted to be, like you said, data. I wanted the data, so I want to make it educated and be able to explain this, because it's understanding it was just as important as fixing it.
Yeah. So I'm going to change gears a little bit, because you were recently on the cover of Men's Fitness. And when I wrote this question, I was like, hopefully this does, how does that happen? Right? Which could be like, right, an opinion about the cover. You look amazing in the cover, but how does that happen? Like, how do you put that together? Do you have like somebody managing PR? I think these are just kind of interesting things, because like, there's no path for me to be there, right? Like, even if I got fit, I wouldn't even know who to talk to if I got that fit. But how does that happen? I think it's pretty exciting.
Well, that's so. I had some in my past, like in my early 20s, I had some modeling experience, and so I'm familiar with photographers and different magazines and how they work in other countries. So I understood that like there's versions of every magazine we have in our country. There's versions of it in other countries as well. Right? All over the world, that have different publishers, that have people who've bought rights to that. And so I connected with a photographer who I'd seen was getting a lot of girls published in all these magazines. Okay, so he's got relationship with publishers. So basically that Men's Fitness is actually from South Africa. So it's in English, right? Looks good.
Yeah.
It's in English. So if I do an interview or do, stuff inside, it's readable.
Yeah.
But talked to a photographer. He had never done a man on the cover. Most of it was women, and he hadn't worked with men on the cover before. He had a few guys getting some of the magazines, get like stories and stuff. So I said, hey, let's do some pictures and submit them. I'll put my story in, maybe because I'm a little bit older. At this point, I was 51. Let's see if there's a story there for him. See if there's some sort of like, hook for him to put a slightly older guy, a middle-aged guy, on a cover, do a little story and fit at any age kind of thing. And let's get some pictures. And so he had the relationship, we did the pictures, but he had the relationship established with a South African publisher who had several magazines, but most of them were geared towards women. This was the one he had for men. And it was great. So it took. So it was it was still really cool. At 51, to be on the cover of any magazine, but, I'm not a celebrity by any stretch. Yeah. There's most of who they put on those covers in the US especially are celebrities. They've done them, whatever it is. And so that wasn't like the target. The target was for me to kind of create something that was eye-catching, obviously. It allowed me to tell a story and allowed me to kind of prove a point, which was, and draw attention to fitness at 50 or older. And that was while at the same time I've been slowly working on this book, the Kicking Ass After 50. And so that's the message. And so that's how I got on there. It was there's ways around the US blockade on celebrityism, with celebrity being the gatekeeper. But that's basically how. But it took some work. It's not getting ready for that.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Yeah. Actually, that was the next question from a nutrition and exercise perspective for that shoot. Like, what did that prep look like for you?
I stayed in pretty good shape most of the time, but I spent about 6 weeks really training on a level that was not sustainable, to be honest with you. It's like something, it's basically, that's what normal,
yeah.
Yeah. And it was a workout that, given as a workout that like an athlete or someone might do once or twice a year to kind of push their boundary, kind of stimulate a lot of growth, so to speak, like from a volume perspective, and just from 2-a-days and high intensity supersetting stuff. So it really, kind of just gets a huge pump, a lot of, striation on things. And so for about 6 weeks, kind of pushing the limits, a little refuel, but then shifting towards letting the inflammation come down for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, little cardio, cutting back on carbs and fat. And then the last week, cutting back on the salt and the water, where I was pretty dehydrated.
Yeah.
To get in front, like you would think. Now, of course, it's not, so anyone listening, it's not like someone stepping on stage. I wasn't anywhere near 4% body fat like a bodybuilder getting on stage. I wasn't that shredded. But it was enough it was great to look good on camera, but I still wanted to
the shots look good. And I knew work went into that, like life work, one. And then like I was wondering like with 6 weeks and then, some thirst.
Some thirst. So a lot of thirst. I was very thirsty after that and during that.
All right. So you have 3 books. You coach people on health, and if LinkedIn is accurate, you even touched business coaching for a while. So what drives you to focus on delivering value to people?
Well, the business coaching, I have to admit, I got the certification because I wanted to. My wife had gone. She was doing some business coaching for a while, and she had so much valuable information in the books that she was getting and reading, and I started reading some of them. And I just, 2 reasons. I wanted to go get a better handle on business concepts. So I went to learn, even though I went to kind of coaching, it was a learning experience in coaching, and also a great connection with business people who are kind of ideal clients, including the head coach, who was a great, great coach, coached realtors for many years. And he was building out this business coaching for Keller Williams, and great guy. Really learned a lot from him. But in just that, it was just learning the business of, or learning the side of business that I just wasn't great at, and that we don't learn when we're focused on health and we're learning how this body works. It's many of us, the business side is just undeveloped. And so it was just kind of a way for me to feed a weaker side of my business to understand that. And again, the connections are great too. You just meet some interesting people who are looking to be successful or in their own, with their own endeavor. Like as a coach, they're sort of, it's the same vein. It's like they're just coaching in a different vertical, but there are other coaches, and so coaching whether in whatever vertical you're in, if you're coaching, there's some skill sets that are common in how you help someone move from A to B. And so it was beneficial from that aspect as well, even though it was a different vertical. The coaching aspect of it was very similar. But oh no, I think I've lost the original.
Yeah, your focus on delivering value to people, right?
Well, yes.
Right. So, and maybe it's an earlier experience that like, oh, this is what drove it.
Yes, I mean, I wanted to really change the concept of health because the mainstream messaging is, as we know, is way off, right? And I've experienced this. I mean, I've been rejecting it for 20 plus years between low carb diet and eating meat and 4 or 5 eggs a day, and these things just like, okay, this stuff doesn't add up. But that's what everyone believes, including the medical professionals. And so we're seeing that start to change now. I think there's a real grassroots movement in in a more holistic approach to like a preventative health space, and biohacking is certainly part of that. But even the diet wars, as inflammatory or as dogmatic as they can become, by and large, they're driven out of a desire to find something that actually works, because in a rejection of the mainstream advice, the mainstream pushing of processed food, of polyunsaturated fats being superior to saturated fats, of this, and sugar's fine or processed fine. It's just as long as you count your calories, food quality isn't as important. That message has failed. Everyone else out there is searching. And so, hopefully searching, but again, even as flawed as you can point out flaws in any kind of circle or area of holistic health, you can point out the flaws, but they're all searching. And I just wanted to share what I was finding in my self-experimentation with as many people as possible through the podcast, through social media. And with my especially, I wouldn't say just completely but especially with my age group, as I got in the 40s and 50s, it's like the struggle is very real, in that we want to keep charging forward. We've got all this kind of experience, and we got some wisdom, and we've got a circle of influence we've developed, and we feel like we're coming into a point of confidence, not just in our own skin, but confidence in our abilities to provide value, right? From everything we've learned, from the mistakes we've made. Yet we're coming up against a physical resistance in our own bodies. It's called age. And so how do we manage that? How do we prevent disease, which we're seeing coming on earlier and earlier? We're seeing 30-somethings with heart disease, and cancer is rising with younger people as well, people under 40. And this is lifestyle driven. This does not exist before. Our everything about our metabolic disease rates, the obesity rates, this is very novel. This did not exist in 1900. And so now we have child obesity at 18 or 19%. That's ridiculous. It's unnecessary. And it angers me a bit. So there's an element of passion there as to why I want to put it out there, because it's just, I'm angry at those messages that are driving this disease and the establishments that are driving this for profit. And I want to help people be informed and be able to make that choice for themselves. But a lot of, like, my clients are often high performers who are either in an executive position or own their own business. And this is who I'm helping. And it's not just like show up for a workout. Like, what's your diet look like? What is your sleep? Let's track your sleep with an Oura Ring or a Whoop strap. Let's, get these processed foods out of your diet. Let's pull back on that alcohol that was so easy to drink in your 30s and 40s, but now it's completely disrupting your sleep and putting weight around the middle that you don't need, infecting your metabolism. And realize you've got to be smarter about your lifestyle choices if you want to keep charging forward and making a difference and stay in your career. And making all that money you're making now. Otherwise, you're going to be hospitalized, or you're going to have to retire early, or you're going to, somebody's going to pass you up because you've got brain fog, and you can't keep up with the young guys because at 2 or 3 o'clock you're trying to pound caffeine because you're losing your edge. And that, it doesn't have to be that way. And so I saw it with my one-on-one clients, people I meet in person, and I wanted to, and again, also developing it with, through COVID, was able to, the good thing that came of that was more and more people going remote. And so developing that remote coaching program and remote coaching, ability to where I can focus on blood work, sleep, like what's your diet doing. It took us, give us a more of a broader view of all the things we can address, or we should be addressing, for preventative health. And it really, made people take a closer look at it. So that was a long-winded answer, but it's basically that. I mean, it's something that's been rolling and continues to increase as I've come through this period where I'm like, okay, I'm dealing with my own age, and maybe little different problems, but really the same problem. It's age is less tolerant. Your body's less tolerant of things that shouldn't be in part of your lifestyle. And you've got to be smarter and more fine-tuned.
You mentioned the anger, right? Like this frustration. I will never forget. And this is probably mid-30s. I read an article in Men's Health magazine, and it was probably even the cover article, which is your metabolism slows down as you age, which I didn't want to hear. Like, I had no interest in hearing that statement. And then I went on to read it, and everything about the article was, well, no, you slow down as you get older, and as soon as you start moving more, your metabolism comes back. So it is not true that your metabolism slows down with age. It is true that you slow down, and if you do not slow down, then your metabolism is maintained. In fact, if you have slowed down and your metabolism is in some sort of decline, you can get it back up. And so maybe that was my first experience with clickbait, because it really the title just pissed me off. But there, I think that is the mindset of a lot of people. It's like, you're getting older and tough. Like, honestly, it happened this week. My mom is in her 80, just turned 80. And her doctor is like, welcome to 80. Like, congratulations that you made it here, and with no focus on, well, what are we going to do health wise? And my mom's of the generation where that's true, right? And so I'm just left here going, I don't like that's just not how I'm going to be at 80. Like it's just, I'm not going to be there. I had one last question, and then I want to be respectful of your time. We got to jump into our kind of wrap up questions, but I thought this. Let me get the whole question. So how much time do you spend per week exercising? And in the context of Dave Asprey is now talking about his physique a lot. He's an interesting character, right? He looks good, right? He's lean, he's got some really nice muscle mass. And he says he's getting it with 15 minutes of training per week. So what do you train typically? And then what do you kind of think of that?
So I will do 3 or 4 strength training sessions a week. Depending on what I'm working. Sometimes it's only 20, 25 minutes. Sometimes it's 45 for strength training. Now, first thing I get up, I don't know what you consider exercise, but I'll get up and I'll do some mobility work first thing in the morning. I'll try to fit that in. And then, which maybe 5-10 minutes to get myself out the door, come back to a little mobility after strength training. So maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes there. And then a little cardio in, like whether it's just going out for some sprints, which might take 20 minutes, or some zone 2 cardio on my spin bike a couple times a week, right? So 25, 30 minutes. I don't do a lot of long sessions. I do shorter sessions. Typically try to get something done within 45-minute period, if not 30, depending on what it is. But that 4 or 5 times a week is a kind of a minimum. And then now I don't know if he considers extra. He's probably not counting walking. I don't consider walking exercise because it doesn't challenge or improve anything for
it's
me
movement,
cardiovascular.
but not exercise.
It's not, and I know there's a big argument online. Oh, walking is definitely exercise. People get their, and what about this person, that person? They get their panties in a bunch over walking. There are benefits to walking, but I don't consider it something that improves my cardiovascular health or my strength. So I don't call it exercise. It's non-exercise activity, like playing tennis or well, actually tennis would be much more active, but it's just not. It's not a focus for the purpose of improving, endurance or strength. So that being said, probably, at minimum 2 hours a week, probably closer to 3.
Yeah.
15 minutes a week. I mean, I don't know what he's doing. I know he's got some of those fancy machines, but I saw a picture of Dave. He looks better than he did.
Yeah.
Certainly he made an improvement. He's lean for sure. I think he could spend a little more time putting on muscle mass considering he's just turned 50. Because it doesn't get any easier. And I would want to go into hit 60 with a little more muscle mass than he's got personally. Yeah. That's my personal opinion. What Dave does is Dave's issue, and he's a smart guy and he's got a lot of stuff figured out, and that's fine. Personally, I would want more muscle mass. And I could find more than 15 minutes a week. I do find more than 15 minutes a week to apply to that goal, because I'm trying to put in as much as I can, because I know after 60, anabolic resistance is a real thing with age. Yeah. That means you don't absorb protein as well. You need more protein to ingest more protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Your body doesn't respond as well to strength training. You need more time for recovery. 15 minutes a week, I think Dave could invest a little more time in his fitness routine and probably see some upside, that significant upside to his fitness personally.
I guess I also have kind of another question inside of that question, which is I'm working 5-6 days a week. I'm doing something, right? So when I often on a Saturday it's a walk, but I'm doing 100 lunges on the walk, right?
There you go.
So like I'm doing good heavy stuff. If I could accomplish everything, let's just say aesthetically and physically in 15 minutes, right? And physically would be kind of strength and muscle mass, and then also VO2 max. I like working out. Like I don't want to just do all of that stuff in 15 minutes. Yeah, it buys me more time, and maybe if I had it, I might change my mindset. But I enjoy that as a mind clearing experience, right? Like that's when maybe that's when I'm getting rid of the cortisol that's built up, and so I'm not convinced that it's a great strategy actually.
No, I get a lot of my ideas, like I clear up things I've been struggling with, or just creative stuff comes to me mind when I think there's more blood flow to the brain, but things are quiet. If you're not plugged into something, you're not listening to something. I use that as my quiet time, and it's cathartic for me, whether it's emotional or mental. There's a cathartic moments in exercise when you're in that zone where it's like, oh my gosh, I need to write this down, or I need to record it, or I need to, these ideas come, and I'm like, oh, I could say it like this. I could say it like I could express it in this way, and I've got to record it because it's like there's this. It's a Zen moment, and and I think what we're seeing as well, if I can add to that, is that longevity. One of the most potent longevity lifestyle habits you can have is exercise. It makes a huge impact on our longevity. They're seeing this more and more and more between myokines being expressed and sent all over the body to improve metabolic flexibility, improve brain function, just muscle mass alone as a glucose sink, but the impact on the brain with perfusion. And if you're if you're improving your metabolic health, which you do with exercise, and but metabolic health ties into your resistance to, or your resistance, let's just say resistance to developing dementia or some other sort of, age-related cognitive decline. I mean, it all is stimulating. It's your brain, it's your body, it's your long-term health, and combating the primary diseases disabling or killing humans right now. Not to mention, when you're over 65, not that Dave's in danger of falling and hurting himself and not getting up, but in general, that is the most common fatal and non-fatal injury with people over 65 is just falling. And it's not because they're running on a soccer field or climbing rocks. It's because they tripped over a chair in their own home. They're not doing that. But they're in their house on their own floor, and they're incapacitated, or they end up in the hospital, or they can't get off the floor. That's directly related to their fitness. So exercise is valuable. And it's not, I'm all about getting what you need. I mean, I minimized my stimulation so I don't overtrain. But at the same time, I think there's a minimal dose that is beneficial. I can't imagine it being 15 minutes a week.
Yeah. All right, here we got our wrap up questions. We can do kind of rapid fire here. Do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Oh boy. I've just said 100 would be great. I think 100 it's a nice round number, and let's just hit that, and let my kids kind of go, oh, maybe Dad knew what he was talking about. So let's go with 100.
That's awesome. How long do you think humans can live?
Well, I think we're seeing, just based on data, we're seeing the longest lived people, most of them being women, are somewhere between 115, 118, someone pushing 120. I think with what we have coming out going forward, not just biohacks, I think hormone replacement therapy, I think a lot of the stem cell research, I think we can be more consistently, we can see more people who are taking advantage of this and who have a little bit more forethought in their health and their lifestyle choices. I can see more people hitting that 120. So I don't know about a peak range, but I think we can increase the percentage of people going from 100 to 120 and having their faculties, in other words. Yeah.
Excellent. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span would you share?
Ooh, shortcuts. Well, I think we've talked about one. Strength training is definitely vital. So keep moving. Eliminate seed oils from your diet. So eliminate processed food. It's not just what you put in, it's what you don't put in. And I think those are gumming up our metabolism and our mitochondria. The mitochondria is where we get energy, and it's our life, basically. It's how we continue to function. And those seed oils are gumming up our mitochondria. And eliminate the seed oils, work out, and prioritize your sleep.
I like it. And then what are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
Well, there was one that I was getting wrong, which is pulling too many hormetic stressors and trying to do all these things that are in some ways good or the right tool, but we just overdo them and we create all this inflammation. So I think it's overtraining or underfueling and pulling too many hormetic stressors. Yeah. We're afraid of food.
I like that. How can people contact you?
Great question. So zanegriggs.com is my website. So you can find all my socials there. I'm very active on Instagram. I'm increasing my activity on YouTube. I do have a way to, if you want to hear about my Build Muscle After 40, if you don't catch one of the conferences, free40plan.com is a great way to get that, my story basically in there. It comes a little workbook to see if that's, something you're dealing with, but it basically outlines what I unpack in that talk with a little more detail of how to build muscle after 40. And that's a good way to kind of get into my head as to what I'm talking about right now.
Excellent. So, and what in the near future are you excited about?
Actually, we talked about already is presenting at Hack Your Health. I think it's going to be fun to see everybody and presenting that at that conference, and just to keep doing these conferences because I just love connecting with everybody. So
that's very good. All right, so you can find him on Instagram. Is that also Zane Griggs?
Zane Griggs Fitness on Instagram.
Zane Griggs Fitness. His website is Zane Griggs. That's ZaneGriggs.com.
Yes.
And then free 40, is that 40?
Free40plan.com. Free40 plan. That's fine.
And 40?
40. Oh, yeah, free 40 plan. Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Free40plan.com. And then maybe catch him at the Hack Your Health conference. This has been a great conversation. Zane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.